But today we have Jane Maginot from the University of Arkansas County Extension Service, and she's going to do a presentation on stormwater workshop, stormwater in residential areas. So
thank you.
Give it to Jane.
Yeah, thanks Michael for having me come out. I think we first talked about, kind of looking around the grounds here at the Omni Center and looking at potentials of doing some new projects. That's kind of our goal today. Is we're gonna flip our perspective of looking at our landscapes from the plant perspective, and I'm gonna look at it from a stormwater perspective. How can we use our landscape to keep water here on this site? That's what our goal is. Now, I will say with Omni Center, you guys have a lot of I call it run on as opposed to run off. So it's a runoff is what's running off of your property. Run on is what you're receiving from your neighbors, and there's a lot going on here. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. So that's when he first reached out to me. We thought, well, let's do a presentation and a little bit of a workshop where we talk about stormwater, kind of give you that perspective to look at, and then we'll go out and look around the property a little bit, do a site assessment, and then come back together and talk about it. And that's what everybody's up for today. So again, my name is Jane Maginot, or Jane Maginot, I'll go either way. I do work for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service, which is part of the University of Arkansas System, the state of Arkansas, Washington County, and the University of Arkansas all working together cooperatively. And so, stormwater. First, let's get an idea of wrap our heads around stormwater. What is it, and how does it impact our waterways? Why, as a water quality agent, am I looking at stormwater as a potential problem? So, if we have natural ground cover and it rains, about 10% of that rain becomes runoff. This is on an average rainfall, on an average setting. There's lots of variables here. We've had 5 inches over the last 3 days. So we're probably having a little bit more than 10% runoff because our soils are already fully saturated. But on typical rain, 10% runoff and 25 deep infiltration with 25 shallow. So 50% of that is going into the ground and recharging our groundwater. And about half of it, a little less than half, is going up through evaporation. So if you guys go back to like 3rd grade in the water cycle, we have water that goes up into the air that's recharging our atmosphere. We have groundwater that's going into the ground that's recharging our groundwater, and about 10% runoff. And natural ground cover can have some development. So we have houses, some streets, some highways, but this is about a natural ground cover. If it rained in this area, most of the water is going to soak in, especially with all these treaty areas. But as we develop and we start creating hardscapes, we look at all the places that can't soak up water. We call those areas impervious. So I'll start using that term a lot. Impervious surface is an area that can't soak up water. So looking at all the rooftops, sidewalks, parking lots, driveways, roads, that area has now gotten to what is probably a 50% impervious area. So about 50% of this coverage can no longer soak up water. So what happens to that water? Yeah, you have a question, go ahead.
We can go ahead with questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Once upon a time I read about surfaces for parking lots and sidewalks that were pervious.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about those.
All right. I just wondered if
one of the techniques we're going to get into. So once we get to about a 75 to 100% impervious surface coverage, so we call it a build out, so a 75% build out. And think of downtown Fayetteville has more than 75% build out. This area has way more than 75% build out, which means that has become a hardscape. We have now lost the opportunity for that water to soak in. It used to be 50%, is now 15%. And what used to be 10% running off is now 55% water running off of our landscapes. We still have a lot of evaporation happening because there are a lot of parking lots happening, and Fayetteville is still very tree friendly, so we have a lot of trees that soak up that water and then obviously breathe it out. It's not technically true, but that's kind of how it happens. So it's called evapotranspiration. And that water goes back into the air through our trees. But 55% of that water is now runoff. That is a lot of volume of water, and it's going to be moving at a lot faster speeds. So the velocity of the water has changed. So here's Fayetteville. from an aerial perspective. So here's the football stadium there. Here's the Baum Stadium, baseball stadium. And this would be MLK and 49. There's a lot of very large impervious surface areas through here that is not allowing water to soak in. So Fable's generating a lot of stormwater runoff. So where does that water go? So it's not, if we just had that much water, we put down concrete, it would flood our homes, it would flood our streets. And so the way we get around that is through our storm drain system. So those openings in your street are there to move water directly from our streets to our creeks. They are a complete separate set of pipes from your sink and your wastewater from your homes and businesses. So when you flush your toilet, that goes to a wastewater treatment plant. If you have dumped out your mop water into a street, that does not go to a wastewater treatment plant. That goes to a creek. And that is to get the water moving off as fast as possible. So there's no filtration on it. And it is a conveyance system of supposedly just stormwater. But what ends up happening is anything on our streets and our sidewalks is going to wash right into that creek. Sometimes there are kind of litter traps on those, but those are without municipal operations being able to clean those can become flood hazards, or they also can become trap hazards for children. They can get stuck in storm drain systems and then unable to get out during a flood. So they're not highly used. So there are, in not all cities, so this is called a municipal separate storm sewer system, so an MS4. Some other cities, thinking of older cities, did send their water to a wastewater treatment plant. New York City, St. Louis, Philadelphia, parts of Chicago, parts of San Francisco. That older infrastructure had the capacity of sending our stormwater to a wastewater treatment plant to remove all that pollution that's coming off of our streets. But what happens is our cities and our water usage has grown so tremendously. Those plants cannot keep up with the volume of water. We get a heavy rainfall, especially here in this part of the state where we get a lot of rain. That water hits, and our wastewater treatment plants basically become, they get churned and they come back up through the storm sewer system. So you get a lot of human waste into our streets. Right. So don't jump in puddles after a big rain in a big city, because there's a chance that they might not be so pounds of dog weight every year. Hopefully a lot of that's getting picked up and disposed of, but if not, especially around our trail system, it ends up right into our waterways. There's pesticides from lawn chemicals or household hazardous waste, such as mop waters or fluoxes being thrown out, carpet cleaners, things like that. Paints. A lot of people think storm drains are a place to put our unwanted materials. And automobile fluids. I believe there's 280,000. So if you've ever been to a parking lot after a rain, you see that rainbow sheen, that's oil. And then the two that I'm going to kind of emphasize the most on for our stormwater is going to be the nutrients and sediments. So they come from fertilizers, pet waste, erosion. And sediments that come from mostly construction sites, erosion and bare soils. And back to that velocity of that water when it leaves our property, and now what used to be, a little bit of runoff is now a large amount of runoff, what that does to our creeks and our streams. So where do nutrients come from? Fertilizers, back to the pet waste, yard clippings. So a lot of people don't think of yard clippings or yard waste being a pollutant, but they really are. So it's very typical in the fall time when all of our leaves drop. All those leaves go into it at its unnatural rate. So those leaves hit into a subdivision that's guttered into a creek or stream. All those leaves start to decompose, and when when an organic material starts to decompose, it sucks oxygen. It uses oxygen, and so the oxygen level in the water will drop, and it causes a fish kill. So it's very common in the fall time to have a fish kill due to leaf litter. Usually you find the fish kill, walk up the stream a few feet, and you'll probably see an outfall of a big conduit coming out of a storm drain system. And there's a bunch of leaves pop up there that have gotten into the creek in one small confined area. Same thing with the grass clippings. I mean, we talk about compost a lot. You guys will probably know, how to compost your yard waste, and it creates nutrients in our water. So, and fertilizers, this is obviously overspray of a fertilizer. And then back to that velocity. So there are nutrients in our soils already. So when we dislodge soil from its place, and we put it into the stream, we're letting those nutrients become released in that stream. So especially things like phosphorus, it becomes water soluble and it goes out into the waterways and comes into our creeks and streams. And the problem is something called eutrophication. So all those nutrients make plants grow. That's why they're there. That's great. Except that there's certain plants that grow out of control when there's too many nutrients in the water, one being algae. So what happens is that nutrients hit the water, the natural occurring algae that should be there is living on the bottom of the water, but it starts growing out of control and it gets large and it causes an algae bloom. When it dies, it floats to the surface. And what happens when something dies?
Sucks oxygen.
It sucks the oxygen out of the water. And so it takes all the oxygen out of the water, lowering the oxygen levels, and it also causes a giant mat on top of the water, which means that there's no light penetrating. So the plants that should be growing on the bottom of the water can't, because there's no sunlight anymore. They have no access to light. So you get this algae bloom that suffocates fish, and the algae dies, it blocks the sunlight, and it creates a dead zone. And you've probably heard about the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. Most people at this point have at least heard about it. It's a varying size depending on the time of year. Warm weather and warm waters increase the growth rate of algae. So that's usually a problem in the summer, where it's not usually a problem here in the winter months here. But it moves across the Gulf of Mexico, and it has had major impacts on shrimping and fishing in the Gulf because nothing can live in it. Not even the food sources. We're talking down to the phytoplankton. And it's a natural process. So again, we have trees that drop leaves. Those leaves go to our creeks. Eventually, our creeks and our streams fill up. That's a natural process. But what used to happen over centuries is now happening within decades. It's happening within our lifetime, in a generation. You can see it happening. I can tell when I was a kid to where I'm now as an adult how our rivers and our streams are shifting and changing. And nutrients are a major contributor to that. And another big one, so this is actually, so the two big in Northwest Arkansas are nutrient and sediment. Sediment is the largest pollution source in the United States. So this is what's really hurting our streams across the nation as a whole. And this is what it looks like in a river. It is lodged full of sediment. So where is it coming from? Back to that velocity of the water when it leaves our properties, and it's shooting off of our roofs, going through our gutter system, out to a street, into a storm drain, right to a creek. And it's going fast, and it's making these cut banks. And you guys have all seen cut banks. There's nobody living in Northwest Arkansas who has not seen a cut bank on a stream, because if you've been to a stream, you see that water, it shoots through there, and it takes away, it's eating away. And I'll tell you, our property in Northwest Arkansas is expensive. So every time that property drops, it's dollars falling into the water, and you're dislodging those nutrients into the water, and you're making our water very turbid. So turbidity, it mucks up our water. So what happens to that water? So it's just mud, so what does it do? As that water, first of all, it's muddy, so you can't see through it. Fish can't find food. If you jump in it, you can't see your feet. You don't want to go swimming in the muddy water, so recreation use is lost. And then also is that as that water starts to slow down, so you have a channel and it's hitting through the west fork of the White River, man, and it's coming through fast. But then when it hits Beaver Lake, it slows down. That speed of the water is going to slow down as it hits a larger body of water. And all that sediment is going to settle. And it's going to cover up the bottom of the lake. And it covers up the food sources for our fish that live on the bottom of the lake, and those plants that are there that produces the oxygen in our water. And eventually it will fill up our lake. Lake Sequoia, and for the city of Fayetteville, they're having to pay millions of dollars to have that lake drenched because it filled up. So much so that the fish that was a major fishing lake for many years, and the water was too warm, the fish couldn't survive because the lake was too shallow, so the sunlight was heating up the water so quickly. And so now it's being dredged. So this is old, this doesn't exist anymore, so this is at Gully Park. And that's one of the walls of erosion there that we've recently had gone through. I always get my acronyms confused. It's WCCW. Sandy Formica and Matt Van Amp's group came out and did a water restoration, creek restoration on that one, so that one's got to change. All right, so the more you know. That's the doom and gloom. That's all the bad things. That's the negative. So let's brush off the negativity, get past that, and go push into, well, what can we do about it, right? So there are things that we can do. Now that we know what the problem is, let's work backwards and try to figure out how to solve it. I can't regulate this. I mean, if I could tell, City of Fayetteville, it is illegal to pick up, not to pick up your dog waste. Does that make everybody pick up their dog waste? No. It's illegal for anything to be in our storm drain system that's not stormwater. Does that keep people from putting things out there? No. Right. So we can regulate it, but it's not solving the problem. So let's try to maybe I'm naive, but as we educate people, perhaps they know the issues, they can do things to make things better, even if it's small steps. So a few of those, we're just going to go through some basics. We talked about chemicals as integrated pest management. I'm not going to get into detail of that because that's another 4-hour workshop. How to manage your pests. So it's something that if you're trying to grow gardens, especially for vegetable production, and you actually want something to eat. I'm an organic farmer. I own a 120-acre farm down in South Washington County, and we first started our farm. There was a organic farmer down in the River Valley, Bob Leitner. We met him at Ozark Natural Foods, and he came up to us one day and he said, "You kids getting into farming?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he was just like, "Grow 3 times as much what you need, because 1/3 of it's going to die, 1/3 of it the pests are going to eat, and 1/3 of it you're actually going to get to sell." So we're like, okay. So we kind of started with the right mindset, I think. But so manage your pests. You're going to need to do it, but there are ways to do it other than just spraying it with chemicals. I feel like this is probably preaching to the choir with this group, but scooping it off, that includes fertilizers. So if you are using fertilizers, we like fertilizers. There are many different forms of them. There are chemical fertilizers, there are synthetics, there are natural fertilizers. Our soils need them. They can't hold the capacity to keep healthy growth of our lawns and our gardens. And so we like to use them, but if you put them onto a sidewalk, you're not going to grow more concrete, so just sweep it off, because when it rains, it's going to end up straight into the waterways. We do soil tests at our office for free. It's paid through a fertilizer tax. Anytime anybody buys a commercial fertilizer in the state of Arkansas, there's a tax added to that fertilizer bag that goes into our state system, and then you bring in your soil sample to our office. We will test it and tell you exactly the amount of fertilizer that you need for your lawn and your gardens, if you tell us what you're using it for. And so that way we're trying to stop people from using too much fertilizer, because that also gets washed through our soils, and keeping it there. Oh, and then also this is when I'm harping on this winter, because we actually had a winter, is salts and sidewalk salts during ice events. People put it out there, which is great. Again, it's health and human safety. We don't want people falling on the sidewalks. But then after that event's over, sweep it off before the next rain event happens. And so that way we can put it back into the trash, or use it again at the next snow event.
Do you want to sweep it off or sweep it up?
That's a good question. You don't want all those salts back in your grass.
Uh-huh.
That's a sweep up. Because depending on the salts, and depending on your grasses, I mean, you've got your sidewalk lined with rose bushes, that would probably be okay.
Uh-huh.
But most grasses are not going to tolerate salts, which is actually why we don't want it into the waterways, is because they can kill off aquatic vegetation.
Right.
Composting yard waste is probably the best thing. In Fayetteville, we do have a commercial industrial compost for yard waste, so the city can take it for you. And vegetating bare spots. Again, it's one of those things that's really an easy thing to do, but it causes a lot of surface erosion in lawns. Okay, so that's kind of my elevator skill and the fast stuff. This is going to be kind of more of the introductory to the nitty-gritty of what we can do. So I call it introductory to the details. And this is something that we can get you more information on. And I'll show you where our website is at the end about how to find more information about this stuff. People write dissertations on LID. I think we need a lot more people writing dissertations on LID. We need a lot of research in there. So what is LID? It's low impact development. So how do we develop without having as big of an impact on our waterways? So we want to slow it down, soak it in, or spread it out, and soak it in. So that is our goal with water. When you think about water in landscaping, the first thing you think to yourself is, how can I slow it down, spread it out, and soak it in? How do I keep the water here? As opposed to how do I get rid of it? Because it's always been, how do I get this off my property? I've got drainage issues, how do I get the water off? There's all this like water near my home, I want to get it away from my home. How do I get it away from my home? You don't want your foundation to be compromised, but how do I get it far away from me? It's a problem. But we want to keep it, because we want it to go back to that 50% that used to saturate into the ground. We want that to happen again. That is a filtration system for any pollutants that are going in. So the first step, and this is actually what we're going to kind of do, and it's actually nice for me that it's raining. As a stormwater educator, I like the rain. But umbrella survey. Go out into your lawns during a rain event, not a dry event, but while it's raining, look at where the water is coming from, where is it going, how fast is it moving, how much is there, and create a map for it. So we have some site maps here that I've put together. You guys will each get a little bag before we head out, and in there is a map. And on that map, I put in County Center. So here you are. And when we have little clipboards, we'll go outside and we'll look, and we're gonna make a map of our property. Where's the impervious surfaces? Where's the water draining to? Where is it coming from? What are our opportunities for improvement? And so next we're going to be kind of tools. Think about compost. How close is that compost to a street? Is it, garden areas? Where are you storing things? If this is your home, where's your animal runs? If you are having an animal outside, are there natural drainage ditches and alleyways through your property? Is there a storm drain easement from the city through your property? Where's the closest creek to here? Things like that. Just get to know your home and your yard from a stormwater perspective. One of the things that I find fascinating is just to try to determine how much water are you generating? What's the volume of water that your footprint is having? And so to do that is actually quite easy. And I do not like math, and it's easy for me. So I feel like if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's just length times width. So if your rooftop, and we're not talking three-dimensional here, we want shadow, bird's eye view of your house. So you're looking down two-dimensional view of your home, just like this. What is the length times width? And then you can multiply that to find how much of an impervious footprint your property has. So think about patios, driveways, sidewalks, all of that can be incorporated into it. So if your home is a 25 by 40 foot home, which means you're living very small footprint, you have 1,000 square foot impervious look down onto it. And so with that, so you have 1,000 square feet, so how much rainfall does that generate? Well, during a 1 inch rain, your 1 inch rain, your 1,000 square foot roof will generate 623 gallons of water. So then you're going to take that and multiply by 0.623. So if you have a 900 square foot house, you'll have 607 gallons of water. If you have a 1,250 square foot home, you're looking at 780. 3,000 square foot home is 1,869 gallons of water for every 1 inch rain. Again, my house have had 5 inches of rain over the last 3 days. So that's a lot of rainfall, even if you're living on that small footprint. So that's how much water you're generating, which is also important to know if you are going to put in things like rain gardens or some of these projects that we're about to talk about, these tools and techniques, to know how much water you're receiving, to know how to build those properties. So assuming in North Arkansas we typically have about 45 inches of rain a year, so an average annual rainfall on a 1,200 square foot home, which is again still pretty small. And again, we're thinking roof print, that doesn't mean floors. You could have a much larger home, but just looking down. You get 20,000 gallons of runoff every year, and that's a lot of water. So here are some tools that we can use to try to help mitigate that runoff. How do we slow it down, spread it out, soak it in? Redirected downspouts. On each one of these slides, I will have 3 things to look at. How much does it cost to install? Can you do it yourself, or do you need a professional to come do it? And how much volume of water are you actually getting to soak in? What's your mitigation? What are you doing? How much can you capture and keep on site? So redirecting downspouts. A lot of downspouts come straight off of your roof, down the side of your building, out to the street. They're channeled all the way out the street. A lot of them come off the roof, down the side of your building, and channel right out to your lawn. A little better. Or they channel right out to your driveway. Not so good. So look at where your downspouts go, and then think about how you can improve that. So this one was going to a driveway. You can see the concrete there. And they just bought some big little channeling and some braces and put it to their flower bed. Better. This guy slowed it down. He just put it down this beautiful rock feature, cut off the pipe, put in a little outfall there, and then actually dug up some of this gravel. So giving it an opportunity to soak into the ground there. This person went the El Chico route, still works. Instead of having it rush out in a large volume, he's having it go out at least into his grass. So there's many different ways. Again, you're looking at it to slow down, spread it out, soak it in. So how can you do that? Rain chains, very cheap, easy to install. You can put them in the summertime, take them down in the wintertime, so you don't have to worry about them freezing. And their goals, they come down where you remove your old downspout, you put this in its place. It's very beautiful. It has a nice, well, it'll have a kind of little tinkling sound when it rains. It's very peaceful. And that water goes down the chain. It trails the water down. And if you notice, all of these have a cupping feature. So I believe this is a Japanese originated idea. Is these cups slow the water down every single time it's stopping and slowing down that water. So it's not hitting at such a high speed. It's not going to wash out as fast when it gets down here. There are a few things I would like to just point out as considerations. One is to make sure your patio, like in this case, would be sloped away from your home, because if not, you just created a major flooding impact inside your house, because if not, it's going to fall out there. And then two is also, as noticed, they all have a catch basin that keeps them from just going into the ground and creating a washout area. So this one, it probably hits the bottom and then it just flows over the sides. I heard you can get these at like Tractor Supply now. Like there was somebody in the audience recently that said that they sold them at Tractor Supply, but they're pretty readily available and very popular. It's not working a whole lot on slowing or soaking a whole lot in, but it's better than a gutter. It's slowing it down. It's very easy. It's a very small thing that can be done, and it's also very pretty. It draws attention, which to me is an educational opportunity when someone visits your home and says, "Why do you have that? Like, what is that?" And then you can explain to them. Flows here. This looks like it's pretty low. Those are actually probably 6 to 8 inch berms all the way through. So he's built up this whole 6 to 8 inch berms. This one's freshly installed. Again, this is in Maine, so he used asparagus. Right, I think he's having a hard time controlling that. I would recommend some native grasses that I'll talk about here shortly. There's many that can be used that can be put into these berms to help keep that soil in place as they grow down. But these keyholes are dug out deep. The water flows, it sucks in there, and it just kind of meanders its way out. If you notice, there's quite a bit of water generating here. By the time it gets here, there's hardly any even water coming out of that downspout. So he's given that water an opportunity to soak in. Same thing here, instead of this one's pretty elaborate, this one's kind of easier. But you can see that's the whole bermed area there. So there's the first keyhole dug down, and then this whole area is indented.
How deep are the keyholes?
3 feet.
3 feet? Oh.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
do you fill them with gravel or you just
You
leave
can
them?
do, yeah, larger gravel on the bottom, and then kind of a pea gravel, and then you can use, again, sand and then some topsoils.
Oh, okay.
Because
So
you're
maybe
going,
it's kind of like a little mini French drain in a way.
exactly, or a little mini rain garden.
Yeah.
That right at your downspouts to catch them before it ever gets a chance to even run off. And this is something they worked on over the parking lot, and this is the little mini swell system. So inexpensive, and do it yourself. So I would put in a bioswale, it's inexpensive that you can do yourself. And it's to make a series of small ones. As opposed to putting in a large system that might need backhoes and things like that. So this is a parking area, and he's put in 3 different berms here. So the water comes off, catches, filters, and runs, catches, filters. Again, this isn't just going to require you to do a little bit of trial and error. If you are, not very happy with stormwater, I actually have used sandbags to put in place in advance, just to see, okay, if I make it this big, will this work? And then wait for the next rain event, see how the sandbags do. And then, okay, I'm going to add some more sandbags here. And that way I know kind of the size. Stormwater is extremely hard to predict.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of places stay away from it. So we really try to determine that flow off of there.
You mentioned though, with the rivers, that there is sediment.
Mm-hmm.
How fast do those kinds of berms fill up with sediment?
You do have to maintenance them, right? So yes, all swells and all rain gardens require maintenance because you'll have to dig out that sediment that gets caught in there. So you have to go through and shovel.
And what do you do with it? Put it on top of the berm, or?
You could probably put it on top of it. It's going to be really, usually it's really fine sediment. It kind of gets big, so you can actually just throw it back out in your garden, spread it out. A lot of times, and depending on what kind of parking lot, you guys are getting a lot of parking lot here. I don't know what kind of metals and petroleum products you're getting off of that, so I don't know how to put that back into a vegetable garden versus, say, like just back into a lawn area that you're not going to eat the products from, or if it's going to be, I don't think, they do have industrial ways to get rid of sediment, so like say if there was an automotive mechanic center here, you can actually take that, and they have places at the waste centers, Boston Mountain Solid Waste, another place you can dispose of what would be considered like a little biohazard. I don't think you guys are anywhere near that. But I would probably try to get it back into the lawn, spread it out, and let it kind of filter out. You're not looking at a large volume. It's going to like build over and cramp any grasses that are there.
It'll probably take a while for it to fill up.
It would, yeah, exactly. We're not talking about like over a rain event. It would probably take, depending on, especially because you guys don't have a lot of soil to road your way.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly parking lot coming your way,
Mm-hmm.
so you probably don't have a lot here. But if you're thinking about more of your home and there is an erosion issue, I created some of those with rocks and little mini terraces at my property. And what happened is that the grass kind of grew over the rocks and they kind of flattened out and they made these little shelving systems that kind of go down. That was once a ravine is now plateaued.
Mm-hmm.
And so they filled in. And I probably should go back and kind of clean them out because now it's probably running off faster than it should because it's not having to stop anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So rain barrels. You guys have some here, I saw. And this is also a good way, easy, do it yourself, and fairly inexpensive. We do rain barrel make and take workshops a lot where we make rain barrels and people can take them home. And the volume is pretty low. It's 30. We talked about how much volume of water off of a 1,000 square foot roof with 623 gallons. That's a 55-gallon barrel. Not a lot of water it's holding there, so a lot of it's getting overflowed anyway, but you're slowing it down, and you're probably redirecting it out to a lawn. You're not putting it right back into a guttered system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better than nothing. Or daisy chain, this guy has one gutter that's filling up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 barrels, so larger volumes. And then what I call rain barrels on crack cisterns. So this is old school, thinking back to grandparents. This is what we used to have, in the old days. And cisterns are, could be anywhere from 250 to thousands, 5,000, 8,000 gallon holding systems. 10,000 gallon, but they are heavy. These are not do-it-yourself. You might be able to help with some of the foundation work depending on your experience, but a gallon of water is 8 pounds, so a 1,000-gallon tank is 8,000.
8,000.
Right, so that's pretty heavy.
4 tons, yeah.
Right, so that's something that's going to require some foundation, as opposed to the rain barrel that wasn't. I mean, you can just put a rain barrel down, you don't have to worry about it, but that's going to require some foundation work to sell, and you don't want that tipping over. And they also can be sunk in the ground. So all you have is exposed is a little cleanout filter. They can be rewired back into your home for gray water. It's really the water conservation. Or they can do just your irrigation systems, which there are quite a few in North Arkansas and Fayetteville that use this type of rain barrel or rain cistern irrigation for landscaping. Because this is never going to have enough pressure to water a drip irrigation system or an irrigation system connected to your home. This does. You can irrigate from the cistern, but it's also a lot more expensive. And we do in Arkansas allow rain capture. It's not illegal. So in areas of some states that is a problem where there's a really low rainfall. You can't capture rainfall because it's a common good. But those are areas, we get 45 inches of rain a year. There are parts of Colorado that get 2 inches of rain a year. They need every drop of that. They don't want you taking it because you've now depleted the entire river. So because of 2 inches of rain, they need every drop of rain. So it's a common good. And there are covenants at certain HOAs or POAs that don't allow rain collection because usually it's a mosquito management issue. Rain gardens. Have you guys heard of rain gardens? Yeah, so this is something that's like, I feel like it's becoming more popular. People know rain gardens. They know, which is great, because I think when I first started with this about 15 years ago, it wasn't as popular. People didn't know about rain gardens, but now they do, and they're also becoming much more acceptable aesthetically. So people used to hate seeing lawns in these manicured neighborhoods that were overgrown or messy. And sometimes that's what rain gardens kind of look like, because they have a lot of native grasses that are tall and unmowed. And I think now they're becoming really more acceptable, and they know those butterfly gardens, they know these native plants are doing beneficial things for our lawns. And so some rain gardens, again, these are somewhat expensive. They can be done by yourself if you know what you're doing. We see a lot of people that put in rain gardens that are under-engineered, which means that they get a lot of volume coming off of their roof, and it's just going to blow out that rain garden. Or they don't amend the soils underneath, and they're just putting it right on that red clay. A common one that we see is that we have this spot in our yard that doesn't drain, and so we put in a rain garden. It's like, well, it didn't drain. It's probably not a good spot for a rain garden because the whole point is to soak the water in. We want to drain that water to soak it in before it gets to that spot that doesn't drain. How do you keep your water away from that area that's not draining?
But basically, you got to sort of dig out all the clay, like
We dig out a
create a
giant
pit
hole.
and then refill it with.
Soft.
Yeah, so it's back to that kind of that same keel berm situation, but on a much smaller scale. And this is much larger. This will do a parking lot. This will do your whole rooftop or a side of your home or building.
Is there a rule of thumb to size a rain garden?
There are, and there are lots of resources I can direct you to.
Okay.
We have how to make rain gardens, but there is.
Probably depends on soil
It
type.
does
and
depend on
perk.
soil types, and yeah, I've seen a lot of organizations out there that put out these kind of like spec sheets. I think it's great as a starter, but if you're really going to install one, I think you need to get into soil types and.
So how deep would you go, like 2 or 3 feet, or?
Yeah, depending on how big they are. If it's really for a homeowner residence, that's usually about what you get out. Yeah, that's why a lot of people can go with shovels.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I've seen very successful, beautiful rain gardens installed at home without large equipment. But
Just got to find out where to put all the clay then.
yes, right. We do need a berm. They're not flat, so that could be the base of some of that berm there. So because you want a lip to hold that water in. So as that water fills up, it'll fill up during the rain event. And then within 24 hours, you want that to soak. And so they do recommend a perk test. So the first thing you would do is a percolating test where you go down, you basically dig a hole 12 inches deep, fill it up with water, walk away, fill it up with water again, and in 24 hours, if that water's still sitting there, probably not a good site for a rain garden because it doesn't have enough soil. So not any place, even though you're only digging around 2 to 3 feet, If you want to go straight into clay soils, you'd have to dig out a lot more and basically just remove what was there and put it back in, something that's going to create that soil. So, and then saying you want to, especially if you're so much better off. Some places just aren't suitable. All right, so I'm going to just a little shout out here for phytoremediation. So this is where plants can take up pollutants from our water, and then the plant holds that pollutant in place. So it's magic. It's like this is awesome. This is where I think a lot of municipalities are starting to turn to. Highway departments. Off our highways, you're going to see a lot more taller grasses off our highways because it's starting to be used a lot. There is the question of what to do with the plant after you cut it. So even things like sea oats, if it's taking up the petroleum products, then what do you do with that plant afterwards, and how do you landfill that? We're still in these, and how do you cost effectively mow that area? But in your home, it's very easy. So these are just a couple of plants that are known for petroleum. And I looked at petroleum plants. And in your book, I gave you guys will have a little packet of a handout, and this lists all native trees, shrubs, grasses that are good for petroleum remediation. But there is a little subline there that says, some of these are not well-behaved natives. Just because they're native doesn't mean they work in all situations, and some of them are invasive. So just make sure before you plant it, you kind of cross-reference that to a native that play well list. But that is, you guys will all have that when you leave. So little bush elm is popular. Switchgrass is great. That's back to those berms. That's a good one. Really like wet feet. Soft brush and wood oats. I love wood oats, but a lot of people hate them because they do spread a lot. Some people
Say what?
They spread. Yeah, they're not on the invasive list, but when you're like landscaping your lawn, you'll be spending a lot of time weeding these probably. Or we plant them in areas like, we have a bunch in our office, and they're inside of a median area. But they put off a lot of seed heads, but they're gorgeous. I like these a lot. And they're also really, because a lot of people are using these, and they grow so easily. On the campus, the Center for Childhood Development, the Gene Tyson Center for Childhood Development, they have a bunch of these in the front. So every fall I'll go and snag all the seed heads off of all the seeds and then go back and replant them. So pretty readily, easily to find. They grow pretty easily. So, but these are all work for taking that petroleum out. So we're cleaning our water as we're stopping it, spreading it out, and slowing it down, or soaking it in. So another 2 rich. And this is used, again, it's used a lot by cities. The Pacific Northwest, the state of Oregon has been doing a lot of work on at a storm drain now. A lot of their storm drains are little bioswales, so it catches every time it comes off of the street. It's going to stop at that storm drain. It's going to use these plants to remediate that water, let the sediment settle down there, and then filter on through and come out as clean water and rainwater into our creeks and streams. I think that's hopefully the future. If you really are having some drainage issues, this is an old, it's like big drain issues. You're having areas that don't drain water. The old byway is the French drain. It's still effective. It still works. It does slow it down and soak it a little bit, but really it's shooting that water off. But if you're having major, again, this is your home having structural issues, from foundation issues, you need to get the water away from you. This is what's used a lot. And then what people don't really know about, this is kind of a horizontal, so French drain's horizontal, it runs with your landscape. Soaks in the water in this little sleeved PVC pipe that has holes in it, and it's gravel, give it a chance to come in. But these are horizontal, are these dry wells. And the top, all you're going to see is a storm drain inlet on your property. But what you have under the ground is basically a 35-gallon or 55-gallon trash can with holes in it that's been placed in a lot of gravel. So you have dug out the place, you put in your gravel, and you let the water soak in. So it can be a do-it-yourself.
But is there gravel in the container, or is
No.
it just on the outside?
Just
So
on the
it all
outside.
kind of soaks in and then soaks back out. So.
Right, and it does also require maintenance because there'll be sediment. This guy, there are ways to put in cloths around it so it doesn't get sediment laden. A design like this will get sediment in there, so you'll have to go in and have clean outs for it. So that's why there's clean out holes and drain holes. This one's guttered to the house. as well. But yeah, there are many, sometimes it's just, here I see a lot of times it's just an area in the backyard and they can put in something like this. Again, it's just a chance to soak it in. Dry creek bed, so if you have kind of a drainage way around your property that's running through, this is an area that basically you're gonna give up that space of lawn or turf, and you're gonna turn it into a dry creek bed that flows during rain events. Hopefully flowing fast at the top, and by the time it gets down to the bottom, you don't have any water flowing because you've given it an opportunity to soak in. Sometimes they are under drained, where they have a pipe that goes underneath them. That will move that water a little faster if it really is drainage. If you want to see these in action, Mount Sequoia, drive around Mount Sequoia in a rain event, and these are all over the place because they have to channel a lot of water quickly. Yeah. So it's just because of their sloped lawns.
Up on the main part of Mount Sequoia, the retreat center.
Yeah, exactly. Just go up to the retreat center and then drive down and start looking for gravel pathways that would kind of meander like this, and that's what they are. That's what they're doing. And so they can be, again, this is probably a little bit, that looks smaller than it is in real life, it's actually bigger, but yeah, so just ways to kind of channel the water, you're directing the water, you're telling it where to go. It's amended, it's not just digging, putting rocks down, it's a dugout trench way, but it can be very gorgeous. So again, back to aesthetically pleasing and used. Green roofs, we could all afford them, that'd be great. They're very expensive and you cannot do them yourself, especially in a living space. If you want to try to put them in on a patio, there's a lot of engineering that goes into this. There are lots of layers and irrigation and sub-compartments. Lee Porter with Ozark Spring Roof.
She lives up the street from us.
Oh, Lee and I are.
Well, yeah, she's on 9th Street, and you know that whole area was developed with rocks and you know, drainage and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So she started Ozark Spring Roof, and these are her pictures. That was hers. That's what I borrowed from her. Obviously not Fayetteville. But this is over that place in South Fayetteville there, that subdivision with Seals. None of hers are going over living spaces. They're all
that house is next to ours.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are all over porches. She doesn't do any living spaces yet, and they have rain chains too on those. The reason why is just because retrofitting houses is really difficult for green roofs, is what Leah's explained to me, and they're very heavy. When you think about the amount of soil that you're putting on there, you don't want to retrofit a home with a green roof, unless you can prove structurally they can hold the weight of that.
The Fayetteville Public Library has a lot of green roof stuff.
Yeah, right.
They're actually using a gelatin sort of thing for some of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To keep the moisture there?
Yeah. It's
We should do a tour. We'll call Lee and get that in schedule. So for his favors, so this is what you were talking about. I used to hate these because their maintenance on them were really, really difficult. They would get clogged with sediment and dirt, and then they become a concrete shelf. I mean, there wasn't much difference after about 5 years of use. There are lots of examples of failed porous pavers in the area. Arvest Bank off of Joyce, they're one of the kudos to them for being one of the very first people out there to put that out there. But it was put in before the technology was ready to be done, and before our local maintenance crews knew how to install them properly. They take under drains. This is not a simple engineered do-it-yourself project. It takes a lot of experience and knowledge to install these things, to be able to soak that water in. However, I'm starting to be a fan now because the technology and the infrastructure and the research is getting there, and our maintenance people are getting there and are starting to learn about it. There's a neighborhood in Rogers that's being installed right now, and hopefully we're going to do a tour in June. The entire subdivision, their entire streets, thousands of linear feet, they're all going to be porous pavers. And they have a maintenance contract plan in place for the long-term maintenance of these pavers. It's going to take a huge back truck. It's borrowed. There's a back truck in Chicago, and the city of Houston and New Orleans share one. That's how rare they are. To come in and clean up these. But they have developed tools to clean them out intermittently without having this huge equipment come in. So it'll be done every 10 years, but intermittently they'll have these kind of smaller vacuum systems come through and suck out the sediment here. So that's in the true porous pavers. There's a lot of small parking lots. We put in some porous pavers on West and Dixon Street, right behind, it used to be Hog House. I don't know what it is now, I think it's vacant, but that West and Dixon parking lot, we put in, I think there's 4 parking spots we did with porous pavers, just to see how that area would handle and how long it would take to fill in, basically, to maintenance those. Right now, all we have is a lightweight back truck to maintenance it. It's holding okay. You don't know, 10 years from now, is it still going to be able to handle that? And then what do we do? You know, it's basically just a parking lot again. So no, we're still there.
It's behind where Hog House was?
Mhm.
Because there's
Yeah.
a new brewery, microbrewery there.
Oh, it is there? Okay, I didn't know they opened it or not. Yeah, it's still, so if you walk out of Hog House, or, you know, walk around the back lot, right through Hammond Trees,
Mm-hmm.
there's, you'll see that there's a little section, parking
Okay.
spots that are like that. And those are the ones we put in with the city of Fayetteville.
Okay.
We used to have filters on those storm drains. We did it as a kind of a research trial to see how much litter and sediment was going into those storm drains. We can't keep them there all the time because, again, it's a maintenance issue of having to go because you don't want that to get clogged and then that parking lot get filled. But we did a small, we did little video clips of the trash we pulled out of those parking lots, storm drain filters. So even if you don't do this is more of a commercial, industrial size. There are people, residential homes that have paid to have these installed in their driveways. They're very expensive. But anything you can do to break up that concrete, so there's still a grass strip between, even though those aren't porous pavers, those are where you just drive onto them. But just giving a grass strip or a chance for something to soak in, or some gravel, or having these disconnected pavers to give a space for grass to grow. Again, if it's really high, you're driving on that, it's going to compact and be solid. But if this was your patio, that you need it every so often, it's probably not going to be as compacted. Your weight hopefully is not as heavy as your vehicle. Terrace landscapes. So this is kind of the last one. Again, these can be do-it-yourself if it's small scale. You can move some rocks around, or they can be very engineered and professionally done, especially for these size scales. But they are very useful in Northwest Arkansas as we have a lot of sloped areas that can catch a lot of water. And so I do try to tell people not to heap up over the mulch area, because if you're trying to stop runoff from happening this way and you've already filled in your entire wall with sediment or with dirt and mulch, then sediment's going to flow right over it. You're not really stopping anything, but having more of a lip for a chance for it to catch that, and it will need to be maintenance and cleaned out if you're catching sediment. But it also has the opportunity to stop a lot of volume of water. Slowing it down, soaking it in, spreading it out. Those are our tools. And so just kind of thinking about which ones are right for you. So is there a return of investment that you care about? A lot of these LID features are not going to give you a return of investment. The city of Rogers, that one was the developer, his reason and rationale for putting in this incredibly expensive infrastructure to stop the drainage from the neighborhood is because our cities are required, they put out drainage manuals that say you have to stop. If you're building an area, and you're putting in a subdivision, and you're creating drainage down, you put in this impervious footprint, and you're now creating this much volume of water that's leaving this area that did not before, you have to prove a plan that mitigates that runoff. Usually it's a giant bioswale. So it's a big area that captures water. We look at it as a retention pond or detention pond. They either have a big dry area with grasses, or they have like a little, you go to a subdivision, you'll see little ponds.
There's one on 15th Street, below, what's that? It's below Huntsville Road. It's on 15th Street as it turns into 16, and there's two big major developments.
Yes.
And the one to the left,
yes.
they put one of those
Yes.
water catchment things.
Yes, exactly. So those will be, I think, retention.
Do you think they're doing enough there?
And
Because-
so, it's a lot, right? So, if they're following the guidelines that set by the city,
Yeah.
there are those posts, and so post-construction, they're supposed to be able to pass, so they're not generating more runoff
Yeah.
in these urbanized areas. And so that guy in Rogers, basically the cost of the land there is so high that he was able, his rationale was basically to give up the land, I can build these many more homes for the size of bioswale that I'll need. It's going to cover the cost of putting in that entire area of the porous pavers.
Yeah.
And so to him, the land cost was that valuable. He didn't want to give up the land for the bio retention pond. So that's where we are. So hopefully, that's his rationale for return investment. Most of these for homeowners are not going to see a very high return investment. Our water is fairly cheap here, so even if you put in cisterns, you're probably not going to cover your water bill uses off of your house. Who knows 20 years from now what our water bills would be, but it's going to take a while. Is it going to solve a problem? Do you have a drainage issue or a flooding issue that you're trying to solve? So you have a problem you're trying to fix, or are you using it for water needs? You're trying to capture water to irrigate with just because you don't want to water with, or do you think you're going to try to irrigate the landscape using a rain barrel? So just consider that. And then again, back to the volume and maintenance. Again, most of these will require maintenance if nothing else, but we do maintenance. So, all right. So just so you know, this is our website, theknowtheflownwa.com. These are all links, so that will direct you to how to do a site map. Sorry, that's going to determine, how to do your site map, your umbrella survey. That one's going to take you to a list of all of our tools and resources. What I talked about here was just a handful. There's a lot more online, and most of them are going to take you to links to either our other pages on our website to tell you how to install these things. How do you calculate the size of a rain garden? How do you build a rain barrel on your own? Or it's going to take you to how do you, another extension service in another state that's going to show you how to put in a dry creek bed. Like what are the dimensions, what are you looking for? So those specs are on that one. And then also gives you back to how to calculate the runoff. So if you guys are interested, that's where that information will be. So now it's your turn.